It is such a privilege to be among you today. I have a soft spot in my heart for this congregation. Aw, thanks. As Catherine mentioned, I served here over a decade ago for a year as a consulting minister of religious education, and I know many of you from that era. And you all are also one of the congregations in the Bay Area that's giving me hope for the future of Unitarian Universalism in our region, and I'm just grateful to you for being those people. So it's with a full heart that I arrive in worship today. As Catherine mentioned, I wear two hats in Unitarian Universalism, and indeed it is my commitment to the work of UUSC that brings me to you this morning. So in our time together, I'm going to tell you three stories. In the first, I'll take you with me on my journey of conversion, really, from someone who had a vague sense of what the UUSC does to someone who thinks it's one of the most important and inspiring things that we UUs across Canada and the US are doing collectively. Second, I'm going to tell you a remarkable story about one of the many things that has bloomed from the UUSC's unique way of working in partnership with grassroots movements and organizations here in the US and across the globe. And third, I'm going to tell you a story that I hope includes you. But first, me. I've been a UU for a long time now. I discovered our faith when I was in college in the 1990s and was so delighted that there were people who agreed with me religiously. I'd been arguing my way through a lot of Sunday schools. I was ordained to our ministry in 2002, so I had known about UUSC mostly through their annual fundraiser, Gift at Your Table program, because I'd served in religious education in congregations. But my understanding was vague, and my support was mostly theoretical. And in the spring of 2024, that all changed. Just out of curiosity, I did hear some of you know about UUSC, but would you just raise a hand if you've heard of Guest at Your Table or UUSC? Okay, so some of you, for sure. Great. So in the spring of 2024, I was in Germany as a guest researcher while I was on sabbatical from Star King, and it was that good fortune that allowed me to go on the UUSC's trip with their board to visit some of their partners in Poland. The plan was to meet some of the UUSC partner organizations working with refugees fleeing from Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I experienced several learning sessions conducted over Zoom. There was background and context to understand, ways of thinking about power and privilege in the partner visits. There were self-reflection about how the firsthand stories might land with each of our own identities. There was covenant building and caucusing. The sessions were real and tender and thoughtfully carried out. I was already really impressed. So my train pulled into the main station in Warsaw, and I walked to the hotel where we would be spending a few days. It was old and beautiful. I found my room, and a little while later, I found the conference room where we would be sharing our meals and our reflections. And have you ever had that experience when you walk into a room full of people and it just felt good? This was such an experience. It was an excellent group of people. On our first partner visit in Warsaw, we arrived at a community center created by Foundations Towards Dialogue. The two women who had founded this organization were committed to the rights of Roma people in Poland, changing their society through education. The community center was bustling. It was full of people, women, mostly women and children, bubbling voices, people of all ages. It was the size of a large house with a meeting room and a kitchen downstairs and several bedrooms upstairs. The backyard was large and grassy. There was play equipment. We didn't share a common language with most of the people in the community center, but they welcomed us in with warm smiles and gestures. We learned a great deal from our hosts, the organization's founders. Roma people are a transnational nation encompassing many different groups and experiences and over 100 different dialects. Originally from India, they have experienced marginalization and persecution in Europe for 700 years. Because they are considered by governments to be nomadic people, they are often not afforded refugee status. Shelters routinely turn Roma refugees away. So after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the Foundation Towards Dialogue was able to pivot quickly and meet the needs of Roma refugees. They created a Roma Poland-Ukraine Day Center for Integration, which provides Ukrainian Roma refugees, primarily women and children, with psychological support, legal aid, mentoring, and education. The center offers a safe place during their recovery from the trauma of the war and the displacements it's caused, as well as the discrimination and hostility they received arriving in Poland. The feeling of love and community in that place was palpable. They were also the first during this trip to say to the UUSC board and staff something that would become a refrain. From the beginning, you were listening to us, paying attention to us. You heard what we needed and helped us get that. And you didn't make us fill out 100 pages of forms that takes us away from the work that we're doing. Another group that's routinely turned away from shelters in Poland were refugees of African descent. Our visit to the Black Alliance for Justice Poland was poignant. We walked into a large meeting hall where we were welcomed with water and snacks. Our hosts opened our time together by sharing some information with the whole group before we broke off into smaller groups for more intimate conversation. The coalition organized to respond to the needs such as providing transport from the border areas to cities throughout Poland, advice on staying in Poland legally, and helping with accessing safe accommodation, healthcare, and other basic services. As mass evacuations from the border ended, Black Justice Poland's work shifted from emergency interventions to longer-term support for Black, African, and Afro-descent people who decided to stay in Poland. Members of the UUSC Board of African Descent and others from the global majority spoke with our hosts as the white people in the group silently held space and witnessed the exchange. We all heard the clear resonances of their experiences on different continents of discrimination, oppression, and police violence. One of the leaders of Black Justice Poland spoke directly to the UUSC, the board, about their funding approach as a partnership. It's so unusual. It's a different practice than we have experienced with other funders. It's part of why we're so excited to meet you today. This would continue as we met other partners. We met the founder of Martinka, who provided holistic services to women fleeing Ukraine alone, especially those fleeing domestic violence or escaping trafficking, because the men couldn't leave Ukraine. She radiated with her clarity and conviction that they helped turn great pain into power. At the time of our visit, they had 18 team members and an annual budget of $250,000. They were fielding 10 calls a day, sometimes working with women anonymously as they assumed new identities in Poland so they couldn't be traced. Martinka also educates women around topics that were taboo in Ukrainian society, like gender fluidity, LGBTQ equality, abortion, and sex education. The founder told us that many funders had already left the region because it wasn't flashy anymore. You are different, she said. You make a transparent commitment up front about how many years you will support us, and you stick with it. Plus, she said, you're willing to fund a small group like us who talks about things that other people don't like that we talk about. We met with several other partners while we were in Poland who said the same thing. You are different than other funders. You listen to us. You respect us. You help us with what we want help with. It knocked my socks off. I'm not sure I had ever felt so proud to be a Unitarian Universalist. UUSC has developed a way of working relationally, nimbly, identifying the people and groups at the intersection of their funding priorities: climate justice, migration solidarity, humanitarian crisis response, and democracy and protecting civil liberties, including gender justice. UUSC is often able to get funding quickly to folks with marginalized identities whom larger funders are not often willing to support. The staff at UUSC work with their partners, the grassroots justice advocates, to identify how they can be most service. And it usually involves granting money, but that's only part of it. Depending on their needs, they can also provide advocacy from UUSC members in the United States and Canada, research, justice education, technical assistance, strategic communications, and helping people to come together by funding convenings to enable greater collaboration. UUSC currently works with 70 partners in the United States and around the world, including the US. I just said that. 20 countries, including the US, and has 47 full-time staff people. Oftentimes, UUSC is the group's very first funder. And sometimes from that little seed, something really big grows. This brings me to my second story, which really exemplifies how UUSC does its work. This telling comes from Mary Catherine Mourn, the UUSC's president. The story starts way back with UUSC's work on human rights to water. Our state in California was one of the places where that work had a win. The California UU Legislative Ministry worked as part of a coalition to pass one of the country's first Human Rights to Water Act in 2012. Were any of you around when we were doing that together? Yeah, that was an exciting moment. In that process, UUSC learned a lot and made deep connections with the environmental climate justice movement. One of the staff people on that project connected UUSC with folks working in an area that wasn't getting so much attention at that time: climate-forced displacement. Few people were really talking about that in the early 2010s. One of the first things UUSC did was publish a report on the importance of funding communities facing climate displacement. So from the very beginning, UUSC was involved in this emerging justice work. In 2018, they supported the first ever convening of Indigenous climate justice activists. It was formerly known as the First Peoples Convening on Climate-Forced Displacement. 60 people gathered in Anchorage, Alaska. It was funded and facilitated by UUSC, along with some support from the Climate Justice Resiliency Fund. But the planning, the agenda, the goals of that meeting were all set by the partner organizations. UUSC brought partners there from all over the Pacific, the tribes in southern Louisiana who were so impacted by rising water there, Alaska, the state of Washington, and Bangladesh. During the week, these community representatives shared the stories of what they're facing, what their challenges are, some of the ways they're addressing them, sharing information, sharing triumphs, sharing heartbreak. They also created a framework for jurisdictions that are having to support communities that are displaced. It's a set of principles that a nation or a city or a state can use when they're helping communities relocate. The tribes in Louisiana had had the experience of creating a beautiful plan for relocation, respecting and preserving cultural identity, the history, the culture in creative ways, even as they lost the land that was so much part of who they were. They got funding from the federal government to help make this happen. This model of what it means to respectfully, with dignity, and honoring self-determination help communities move. They couldn't apply for the money themselves because they weren't acknowledged as a legal entity in the eyes of the federal government. So the state of Louisiana helped them apply for the money, received the money, and then scrapped the plan. The community was given undesirable property, and none of the plan was respected. And unfortunately, this is how it usually goes. So in response, when the folks gathered in 2018, they created a set of principles for governance to honor when they're relocating communities of people. And Fiji actually now has adopted this framework. They still struggle to live into it fully, but they are using it as the country manages displacement of people from rising seawaters. So the framework's existence and that it is used is a testament to the power of this kind of convening that UUSC makes possible. As a result of that convening, UUSC got deeper into relationship with some of the communities in the Pacific. And out of those relationships, they got connected to the Pacific Island students fighting climate change. So this was literally a group of students in law school in the Pacific on Vanuatu. And as a group class project, they created a plan of global advocacy to take to the United Nations to call on them to ask the International Court of Justice to rule on climate and accountability. There has never been a statement internationally addressing accountability for all that is lost as corporations and nations gain more and more wealth from the destruction of the climate. So this is really an amazing story. They were literally 24-year-olds in law school with a dream of going to the United Nations. The UUSC went all in on supporting them, but it really did seem like a long shot. But when they got to the United Nations and made their demands, it was a brilliant reminder of the adage, never underestimate a small group of people to make a difference. In an unprecedented move, the UN General Assembly, by consensus, unanimously asked the highest court in the world to take up climate change and accountability. At the International Court of Justice, usually oral hearings are quite dry and arcane, but not this time. They got 4 speaking slots for Pacific young people to speak directly to the panel of judges. Throughout the whole campaign, the students have been exceptional storytellers. It was a powerful example of centering the experiences of the people most affected. Their testimony and the whole proceedings are on the UUSC website if you'd like to hear them yourself. It's worth it. It's really inspiring. In July, they had what the UUSC's global advocacy strategist, Mayuri Anupindi, called a massive win. When the court rendered their opinion, she said it blew past all expectations. The court not only said there was a right to a clean and healthy environment for all people under multiple bodies of international law, not just the Paris Agreement, but under human rights law, to protect the climate system. When you fail to protect the climate system, they said, it triggers an obligation to pay reparations. This is transformative for climate law. The opinion also addressed climate-forced displacement, saying countries must not return people to a country where there's a substantial risk to life. They even called out fossil fuel production, consumption, subsidies, and exploration licenses as actions that fail to protect the climate system. It's an advisory opinion, so it's non-binding, but it's basically judges explaining what they think the binding legal obligations of nation-states are. It has the potential to really shift negotiating around this year's Conference of the Parties, what we know as COP, and also to seed waves of litigation around the world in individual countries to be more ambitious in their climate action. Already in Australia, a coal plant that was scheduled to be developed, plans for that have been scrapped. So UUSC's funding got Pacific Island students fighting climate change started and helped them get into rooms with bigger funders and allies. The students had all the strategy and understanding that they needed, but they needed UUSC's to partner and act in solidarity, from research assistance to advocacy support from UUSC members to making key connections with a nation-state champion, Vanuatu, from the beginning, and finding them housing in New York while they were there doing the organizing. Sometimes, from a seed of justice, there is real success and real change. So this brings me to my third story, this story that I hope might be about you. Maybe you've been a UU for many years and you've heard about guest at your table. Maybe you had boxes on your own kitchen table when you were growing up to put in a little bit of change. Maybe you're already a UUSC member and supporter, and I heard from a few of you on the way in. Maybe you're visiting today for the very first time. Wherever you are on your UU journey, there's a place for you to be part of the success story that is the UUSC. We are a small denomination in terms of numbers, but not in terms of impact. By neither seeking nor accepting government funds, UUSC maintains a high level of independence, which is exceptionally fortunate right now. For example, UUSC is able to go all in on supporting Pink Haven, which is relocating trans people out of states where it is dangerous to be and getting them established in states where it is safer to be in the United States right now. There are many more amazing stories on the UUSC's website. I won't tell you them all. But my invitation to you today is to consider becoming a member of UUSC and joining your story with its story. With a gift of $40, you can become a member. With a gift of $150, the UU congregation in Shelter Rock will match your gift, so it doubles. With a gift of $5,000, you become part of their stewardship circle. I'm aware that I'm talking to a congregation that has diverse financial means, and that's a good thing for a congregation. So you know what your own resources are and what you're able to do. But it is my hope that today this congregation will join the UU congregations in San Francisco, Oakland, and Walnut Creek in having a significant portion of your membership also be members of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. So you can use the QR code on the screen, or you can come talk to me at the table after the service. And if you want to learn more, this church is going to host a reception on December 9th in the atrium, a simple soup supper with the president of UUSC, Mary Catherine Moore. And so you can really hear firsthand some of her stories about their work. For the past 2 years, I've given UUSC a gift of $1,000 each year, and I'm going to do it again this year. I do it because I know this organization takes our combined resources as UUs and puts them to use in the US and around the world in alignment with our values. I know they work relationally and nimbly and with integrity. I do it both as resistance to the human rights violations here and around the world that break my heart every day, and in honor of the dream that someday my descendants will live in a world where everyone's human rights are respected, in a global commonwealth of humanity in balance with the earth. May it be so.